Okay, good afternoon, students. So welcome to the webinar class for the chapter Respiratory System, that is breathing and exchange of gases. Yesterday we have discussed the introduction part of this, and we have discussed what is respiration, what is breathing, and what are the different types of respiration, aerobic and anaerobic respiration. And we have discussed the direct and indirect respiration, as well as we have also discussed about the respiratory organs in different organisms, right? That is in the evolution of respiration, how the lungs have evolved from the simple diffusion process. So this was the respiratory organs in different organisms. Now in today's class, we are going to discuss about the human respiratory system. Okay. So because this chapter mainly deals with the human physiology. So here we are going to discuss the respiration in the human beings. So let us first of all discuss the structure of human respiratory system. So when it comes to the respiratory system, it is endodermal in origin. So we know what is endoderm, right? The three embryonic germ layers which are present during the gastrulation stage, that is ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm, right? These are the three embryonic germ layers. So the endoderm, that is innermost layer, is the one from which the respiratory system has its origin from. So respiratory system is endodermal in origin. The next thing is respiratory system is composed of conducting portion and respiratory portion. So there are two portions in the respiratory system. One portion is known as conducting portion and the other portion is known as respiratory portion. What is conducting and what is respiratory portion, we will discuss here. So the conducting portion, it provides a passageway for air and functions to condition the incoming air. Okay, so it is providing a passage, that is, it is providing a way for the air to come and conditioning the air. Okay, conditioning the air means outside the temperature can be warm or it can be hot or it can be cold, but when the air reaches inside our body, when it reaches inside the respiratory system, it has to be normal air, means it should not, the temperature should not be very high or very low. So that's why we have a natural air conditioner in our nasal passage. Okay, so that is the one here, the function of conducting portion. One is it provides a passage for the air, and the second one is it also provides, or it functions to condition the incoming air by warming, moistening it, and by cleaning it. So we have the mucous membrane, we have the cilia. Okay, these things, they will clean the air and they will they will moist the air which is coming from the outside, because it can be any type of air. So it maintains it to the normal level as that of our body temperature. And what are the conducting portion? What are the parts of the conducting portion? So the parts of the conducting portions are nasopharynx, larynx, trachea. These are in order: nasopharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and terminal bronchioles. So these are the starting from the nasal passage, that is nasal passage, nasopharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and terminal bronchioles. These are the these are the conducting parts of respiratory system. Okay, that is, they are the conducting portion of the respiratory portion. The next one is respiratory portion. So here in the conducting portion, there is no exchange of gases. There is no exchange of gases which takes place in the conducting portion. But in the respiratory portion, it consists of, what are the parts which are present in the respiratory portion are the bronchioles. After the terminal bronchioles, the next part, that is terminal bronchioles, then alveolar ducts and alveolar sacs. We will see in the diagram also. These organs, they act as respiratory portion. And here in these portion there is exchange of gases. That is, they'll get rid of carbon dioxide. They will remove the carbon dioxide to the external. They will remove the or they will lose the carbon dioxide and they will pick up the oxygen. Okay, so that is the respiratory portion, and these exchange of gases will be due to the partial pressure of the oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay, so now we know about the conducting portion and respiratory portion. When we look at the diagram, it will be very much clear to us what are the parts. Now here, let us see each and every part of the respiratory system. So a pair of external nostrils, here you can see a pair of external nostrils will be present. This leads into the nasal chamber. A pair of external nostrils will lead into the nasal chamber through the nasal passage, and the nasal passage will lead into the nasopharynx. This part is the nasopharynx. Here you can see nasopharynx. So the nasal cavity, nasal chamber, and nasopharynx. And then this nasal chambers, it opens into the nasopharynx with a portion of pharynx. Actually, when we were learning about the in the digestive system, we have learned three parts of the pharynx, right? Nasopharynx, laryngopharynx, oropharynx. Oropharynx is in the oral region. Nasopharynx is in the nasal region, and the last one is laryngopharynx. So this is the laryngopharynx, this is the oropharynx, and this is the nasopharynx. Okay, these are the three parts of the. This is oropharynx. This is laryngopharynx. Okay. So the nasal chambers opens into, this is the nasal chamber, it opens into the nasopharynx, and this nasopharynx is the portion of pharynx. Okay, and we know that pharynx is a common passage for both food and air, right? Yes. So next thing is, now the nasopharynx, it opens through glottis of the larynx region into the trachea. Now here you see the nasopharynx opens through the glottis. Here there is a glottis, okay, and which is having an upper structure that is known as epiglottis, and then it opens into the next part, that is into the trachea. Okay, and the larynx, if you see, it is composed of cartilages and ligaments. This complete structure is of a larynx. Okay, this larynx is composed of cartilages. Okay, we know what is cartilage, we have learned in the first year. And then ligaments and muscle and a mucosal surface. So these are the structures which are present in the larynx: cartilages, ligaments, muscles, and mucosal surfaces. And the main function of the larynx is it helps in sound production, and hence it is also called as sound box. Okay, and it prevents the indigested solids and liquids from entering the respiratory system. Okay, so this larynx will be covered by epiglottis. One of the cartilage of the larynx is epiglottis, and that covers the respiratory system during the process of swallowing. So if by mistake, if solids and liquids are entering into the trachea, then it prevents them. Okay, larynx is also called as Adam's apple. Now here, during swallowing, glottis can be covered by a thin elastic cartilaginous flap called epiglottis to prevent the entry of food into the larynx. Now, so epiglottis is one of the cartilage. Besides epiglottis, there are other cartilages also. Here you can see the number of cartilages present. There are many cartilages which are present in the larynx. Thyroid cartilage, most prominent, C-shaped. Okay, there is thyroid cartilage. Here you can see this is the thyroid cartilage. Okay, it is most prominent and C-shaped structure. Then there is cricoid cartilage, shapes like a signet ring. Okay, and the arytenoid cartilage, at the anterior of which cartilage of Santorini is attached. So arytenoid cartilage, and anterior region of arytenoid cartilage is santorin is attached. Okay. So these are the different types of cartilages. Epiglottis, thyroid cartilage, arytenoid cartilage, cricoid cartilage. Okay. And these are the tracheal muscles, and these are the tracheal cartilages. We know that trachea is made up of cartilages. C-shaped cartilages will be present in the trachea, right? Here, these are the cartilages present in the trachea. So the next part will be trachea, right? So trachea is also known as windpipe. We already know that trachea is known as windpipe, and it is parallel to that of esophagus, which is the food pipe. So the windpipe is a straight tube extending up to the mid thoracic cavity, which divides at the level of fifth thoracic vertebrae. Now we know that there are cervical vertebrae, there are thoracic vertebrae, there are sacral vertebrae, there are lumbar vertebrae, there are coccygeal vertebrae on the dorsal side of the body. But this is present on the ventral side, right? So on the fifth thoracic vertebrae, there will be 12 pairs of thoracic vertebrae, right? 12 thoracic vertebrae will be there. And on the fifth thoracic vertebrae, that is for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on the fifth thoracic vertebrae, this trachea will, it is a windpipe in, and it extends up to the mid thoracic cavity, which divides at the level of fifth thoracic vertebrae. So at the fifth thoracic level, fifth thoracic vertebrae, at that level, which is present on the dorsal side. So on the ventral side, this trachea will divide, and it will open into, it will divide it into two. One will be right, and another one will be left. So right and left primary bronchi. So this is the trachea. Okay. And at the fifth thoracic vertebrae, it divides into a right primary bronchi and left primary bronchi. Okay. So this is about the trachea. It is made up of C-shaped cartilage. Why it is made up of C-shaped cartilage? To prevent the collapsing, okay, of the trachea when there is no air. Now, the trachea, here you can see, this is the larynx, then the trachea, and at the fifth thoracic vertebrae, it divides into two, that is left and right primary bronchi. The next thing is trachea carries air between the larynx and bronchi. So it carries the air carries the air between the larynx and bronchi. So in between the larynx and bronchi, the trachea is present. And not only the trachea, even the bronchi is supported by incomplete rings of C-shaped cartilage. Here you can see incomplete rings. Okay, they are not complete rings. So if this is the trachea, they are like this. So only on one side they are complete, on the other side they are incomplete rings. And the rings of cartilages, they will make the wall non-collapsible due to the presence of these uh, uh, what is that? These tracheal rings. The uh, trachea or the bronchi where they are present, they'll not get collapsed when there is no air inside it. So that is the use of this C-shaped cartilage. Each bronchi. So after the trachea, the next one is bronchi. Each bronchi undergo repeated division. Here you can see now this bronchi is undergoing many divisions, right? To produce primary, to produce secondary, tertiary, terminal. These bronchi, finally they are entering into the alveolar sac. So each bronchi will undergo repeated divisions to form the secondary. So primary bronchi will divide it into two. Actually, from the trachea, it has divided into two. that is primary bronchi, left and right primary bronchi. Now this primary bronchi will divide it into again left secondary bronchi and right secondary bronchioles. Okay, so again this secondary will divide it into more, that is it will be tertiary. Now they are known as bronchioles. Okay, so trachea is dividing it into two to form bronchi. Bronchi are again dividing to form bronchioles, that is secondary bronchiole. Then secondary bronchiole will divide it into tertiary bronchioles. Okay, and ending up into terminal bronchioles. And each terminal bronchiole give rise to a number of very thin, irregular walled and vascularized bag-like structure called alveoli. So the terminal bronchiole, okay, the terminal bronchioles will end up into the sac-like structures. These sac-like structures are nothing but they are sac-like or bag-like structures, and they are irregular walled and they are very thin. These are known as alveoli. Plural is alveoli, singular is alveolus. Okay, so this is about the lungs. Here you can see these are the bronchiole and they are entering into the alveoli. These are sac-like, very thin bag-like structures. They are called alveoli. Now these alveoli, they are made up of simple squamous cells. Squamous cells where we have seen in the epithelial tissues, right? They are flat cells. Why they are flat cells here? Why they are made up of simple squamous cells? Only because they are flat and they provide more area for a gaseous exchange, because gaseous exchange here taking place by the process of diffusion. So more the area, more will be the process of diffusion. So these alveoli, they are made up of simple squamous epithelial type of tissue, so that they will provide more surface area for the exchange of gases. Next thing is the alveoli is surrounded by a network of capillaries of pulmonary arteries and veins. These alveoli, they are surrounded by a network of capillaries, okay, of pulmonary arteries and veins. So this is the alveoli and they are surrounded by the capillaries of arteries and veins. So here there is exchange of gases between them. Okay, air enters into the lungs in this way. Now this is the passage of air. So inhaled air first reaches into the mouth or nose and or nasal chamber, then larynx, glottis, trachea, right and left bronchi, bronchioles, and then alveoli. So this is the passage of air, first mouth, then to the nasal chamber, then larynx, then glottis, then trachea. That is, if you see the diagram here, larynx, I mean nasal chamber, larynx, trachea, primary bronchi, bronchi, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, bronchioles, and then into the alveolus or to the alveolar sacs. So this is the passage of air in the respiratory tract. And number of alveoli is around 300 to 400 millions, and each one has a surface area of 100 square meter. So that is the number of alveoli. You can see how much large is the number of alveoli in this lungs. Then surfactant is a lipid surface tension lowering agent which prevents alveoli from collapsing during the respiration. So this is a lipid surface tension which is present in the alveoli, uh, which lowers the or which will not allow the alveoli to collapse during the process of respiration. And the branching network of bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli comprises the lungs. Lungs is the primary respiratory organ. Here you can see clear structure. Trachea, before that there is larynx, nasopharynx and all. And then it divides into bronchi. Okay. Then this is the diaphragm. Now, lungs are covered by a pleural membrane. Okay, they are covered by a double layer structure. Here you can see a double layer structure that is known as pleura. Okay, and with in this double layer structure in between the lungs and this pleura, there is a fluid present that is known as pleural fluid. And what is the use or what is the function of this pleural fluid is it reduces the friction on the surface of the lung. So that is the use. It provides nothing but it is pleural membrane is for the protection and for reducing the friction on the surface of lungs while inspiring or expiration process or inspiration process. The outer pleural membrane, that is known as visceral pleural membrane, is in close contact with the thoracic lining. Okay, as it is present in the thoracic cavity, right? So the outer one, outer pleural membrane, we know that it is made up of two pleural layers. Outer one is known as visceral pleural membrane, and inner one is known as inner or parietal pleural membrane. Okay, so it is in contact with the lung surface. So inner one is in contact with the lung surface, outer one is in contact with the thoracic cavity, and small space lies in between the two lungs. Here you can see there is a small space which is present in between the two lungs, and that space between the two lungs is known as mediastinum. The space between the two lungs is known as mediastinum. The right lung, this is the right lung and this is the left lung. So the right lung is divided into three lobes. Okay, and left lung is divided into two lobes. So there are two lobes in the left lung and three lobes in the right lung, and the left lung is smaller than the right lung. And the anatomical setup of lung in thorax is such a way that any change in the volume of thoracic cavity will be reflected in the lung. Means if you see the lungs, they are completely compressed structures on all the sides. Means in the thoracic cavity, on the dorsal side there is vertebral column. Okay, on the ventral side there is sternum. On the lateral sides there are ribs. If you observe, try to imagine, on the ventral side there are, sorry, on the dorsal side there is, that is on the back side of our body there are ribs, right? Then on the front side if you see there is sternum. On the front side there is sternum. Then on the sides, that is on the lateral sides, there are made up of ribs. And on the ventral on the uh, what is that posterior side, if you see here, there is diaphragm. So all these things, and in between these ribs there are a costal muscles, external and internal intercostal muscles are present. So all these things, they are um, present in the thoracic cavity only, right? So they are maintaining the volume of the thoracic cavity. If there is any change, the setup of the lungs is in such a way that, because they are bounded on all the sides, so the anatomical setup of lung in thorax is in such a way that any change in the volume of thoracic cavity will be reflected in the lung, that is in the lung cavity. Such an arrangement is essential for breathing, because we cannot directly alter the pulmonary volume of the lung. What is the volume of the lung is, we cannot change, we cannot adjust directly. So it depends on the thoracic cavity. It depends on the volume of thoracic cavity. So they help in the process of inspiration and expiration. We will see in the mechanism of respiration how exactly there is a change in the thoracic cavity due to all these structures, and how the process of inspiration and expiration take place. The next structure is diaphragm. So this is the diaphragm. You can see it is a muscular, fibrous, dome-shaped or structure. It is a muscle actually, and just below the lungs it is present, and it separates the thoracic cavity with the abdominal cavity. This is the region which separates. Okay, this is the structure which separates the um, thoracic cavity with the abdominal cavity. Here you can see nasal cavity, nasopharynx, oropharynx, laryngeal pharynx, then larynx, which is covered by epiglottis, and then trachea. This is the left lung, this is the right lung, and space mediastinum, okay, terminal bronchi, bronchus, finally alveolus, and this is the last one is the diaphragm. This structure is the diaphragm. So important function of the diaphragm is aid in the process of respiration. That is, it helps in the process of respiration, and it separates the thoracic and abdominal cavity. It is also called as phrenic muscle. Now, this contraction and relaxation of diaphragm, it helps in many processes. When it contracts, it helps in the process of inspiration, micturition, defecation, and parturition. So all these are the processes which are involved in the contraction of diaphragm. So it helps in all these processes: inspiration, that is taking the in air; micturition, defecation; parturition, giving birth. Okay, so all these processes are helpful in the are helped by diaphragm. So not only its function is to separate the thoracic and abdominal cavity and to help in inspiration, they are also helpful in many other activities of the body. The next is mechanism of breathing. Okay, so till now we have seen the structure of different organs of respiratory system. Now we have to see the mechanism of how exactly the breathing mechanism occurs. Here we are going to discuss only breathing. We are not discussing the respiration part, which is internal respiration. Here we are discussing only the external respiration, that is breathing. So breathing involves two phases: inhalation and exhalation. Right? Inhalation, during which atmospheric air is drawn in, that is atmospheric air is taken in, and expiration is by which the alveolar air is released outside. Here you can see the three structures which are helpful: lungs, these are the ribs. On the dorsal side, you can see this is the vertebral column which continues, and so here this is the inhalation and exhalation process which are involved in the process of mechanism of breathing. So movement of air into and out of the lungs is carried out by creating a pressure gradient between the lungs and atmosphere. So here a pressure gradient is created in the thoracic cavity, and sorry, in the lungs and the atmospheric air. And that pressure gradient, how it is created, is we are going to see here. Okay, now when the inspiration occurs, if pressure within the lungs, the pressure within the lungs is known as intrapulmonary pressure. Okay, pressure inside the lung is known as intrapulmonary pressure, is less than atmospheric pressure. Means the pressure in the lungs is less compared to the pressure in the atmospheric air. Then there is a negative pressure in the lungs. Okay, with respect to atmospheric pressure, because there is a negative, there is less pressure. So obviously it is less than the atmospheric air. So a negative pressure is there in the lungs with respect to the atmospheric pressure. Is less pressure. And when expiration takes place, the intrapulmonary pressure is higher. So in the process of inspiration, the pressure in the lungs is less when compared to the atmospheric pressure. And at the time of expiration, the intrapulmonary pressure, that is pressure inside the lungs, is more when compared to the outside pressure. So the air will move from high pressure to low pressure, right? So here that's what is happening here in the process of inspiration, because the pressure in the lungs is less and in the atmospheric air the pressure is more. So the gases will move from high pressure to lower pressure area. Here you can see this is the pleural membrane, outer and inner pleural membrane. Outer is parietal, inner is visceral pleural membrane. So respiration is carried out with the help of intercostal muscles and diaphragm. Intercostal muscles between each pair of ribs. In between the ribs, there will be intercostal muscles. And the other muscle which is involved in the process of respiration is the diaphragm. Okay, so these are the two muscles which are involved in the process of inspiration and expiration. And there are other structures, that is vertebral column. This is the vertebral column. Then there are ribs, there are sternum. Okay, the inspiration is an active process. Active process means what? It involves energy. Okay, it needs energy. And it also involves the internal intercostal muscles and diaphragm. So it involves the inspiration process involves two types of muscles: internal intercostal muscles and the diaphragm. Here you can see the chest expands at the time of inhalation, that is when we are inspiring. The chest will expand, that is the sternum will move forward, the ribs will move forward, so that there will be space. The vertebral column will move backwards, diaphragm contracts and comes down, and so that when the all these things are moving forward, so they are increasing the thoracic cavity. The area of the thoracic cavity is increased. When the area in the thoracic cavity is increased, the lungs will get placed for expansion. When they get placed for expansion, then they can take the air inside, right? Whereas here in the exhalation process, it is exactly opposite. So let's see first inspiration. During inspiration, the contraction of diaphragm increases the volume of thoracic chamber in the anterior posterior axis. So here diaphragm is contracting, so it is coming down. When it is coming down, it is increasing the anterior posterior thoracic cavity. It is increasing the area of anterior and posterior axis of thoracic cavity. And then the contraction of external and internal costal muscles lifts. So they will help the ribs and sternum. The lifting up of ribs and sternum is causing an increase in the volume of the ventrodorsal side. On the ribs are coming up, these are going backwards. So the area of the thoracic cavity from dorsoventral side is also increasing. So they are also providing a space for the lungs to expand. Okay, and because of this anterior posterior increase in the volume of thoracic chamber and dorsoventral increase in the volume of thoracic chamber, all these things they will increase the thoracic volume, and this increases the pulmonary volume, that is volume of the lungs. And because of this increase in the volume, there is it decreases the intrapulmonary pressure. Okay, so intrapulmonary pressure, that is pressure in the lungs, is decreased due to increase in the thoracic volume, and which forces the atmospheric air from outside to move inside the lungs. Okay. Now, the anatomical setup of lung in thorax is such that any change in the volume of thoracic cavity will be reflected in the pulmonary cavity. So such an arrangement is essential for breathing, as we cannot directly alter the pulmonary volume. So that is about the inhalation. Then exhalation or expiration. So in the expiration, it is a passive process, does not require any energy, and it is caused due to muscle relaxation. So relaxation of diaphragm and intercostal muscles, they will return the diaphragm and sternum to their normal position, and they will reduce the thoracic volume. So when diaphragm is coming back, and ribs and other intercostal muscles are also coming back to their normal position, then the volume of the thorax, that is dorsoventral volume, will decrease. So when the volume of the thoracic cavity will decrease, there will be pulmonary volume will also decrease. So this leads to increase in the pulmonary pressure. Okay. And this pulmonary pressure, intrapulmonary pressure, will be slightly above the atmospheric pressure. Okay. So here in the lungs, the pressure is more when compared to the atmospheric pressure. So this leads to expulsion of air from lungs to the outside, and it is known as expiration. Now, during the forced breathing or heavy exercise, an active process is involved requiring the internal intercostal muscles and diaphragm. Okay. So in the forced breathing, internal intercostal muscles and diaphragm is also helpful in the process. Deep expiration is done by contraction of intercostal muscles and relaxation of other muscles and diaphragm. And this impulse for deep breath will start from the cerebrum. So cerebrum is the center where which will cause the signal for the deep breathing. It is also referred as thoracic breathing, and it is in contrast to the normal or quiet breathing, which is referred to as abdominal breathing. So the normal breath which we do is abdominal, and the deep breathing is known as thoracic breathing. Sudden deep breath is due to increased carbon dioxide, that is partial pressure of carbon dioxide when it increases, and partial pressure of oxygen when it decreases in the body. Then we get the sudden deep breath. Then breathing at higher altitude. Air at mountain is very thin and of low density. So those who are living in that area, they are acclimatized to that weather. So they don't have any problem. But the visitors, they will suffer from hypoxia, and it causes mountain sickness, including the high blood pressure, high breathing rate. Okay. So when the visitors become normal after some days, when their number of RBC and hemoglobin increases. So why those people are residents are acclimatized? Because they have more number of RBCs and their hemoglobin is also level is high, so that they can transport more number of oxygen. Okay. So visitors, when someone from some other place goes there, they will have to undergo this mountain sickness. So later on, gradually, they will also get acclimatized to that environment. So how they are getting acclimatized? Their RBC number will increase and hemoglobin number will also increase. Here are the rate of breathing in different or in different at different stages. So 40 to 60 breaths per minute in neonates, means just born babies. And 14 to, as you see, it decreases. 14 to 18 minutes in adolescents, 12 to 14 minutes in human adults, 18 to 22 per minute in children. Okay. 0 in embryo, because they don't breathe. They take oxygen from their mother. 10 minutes minimum at the time of sleeping. 10 breaths per minute at the time of sleeping. 80 per minute in the frog. 38 in rabbit. 120 in shrew. Okay. And 6 per minute in elephant. So you can see the smaller animals are having more breathing rate when compared to the larger animals. They are having less number of breathing rates per minute. So this is the breathing rate in different organisms and at different stages in the humans. Okay. So with this, we will complete today's session. And in tomorrow's class, we are going to discuss the questions related to this topic, which we have discussed yesterday and today. So we have completed that one process so that we can discuss the questions. We can frame different types of question and we can discuss them. Okay. So thank you. Okay.